Hello and welcome to Science and Nescience channel. Today we'll be covering our first session on the foundational course. Um, and today's topic is acquiring perfect knowledge. In this world, everyone is after knowledge, and actually, knowledge is compared to light, and ignorance or nescience is compared to darkness. Nobody wants to be in darkness, everyone wants to be in light because when you're in darkness, when you are in stress or in anxiety, you're anxious, you don't know what's going to happen next. So it's not a very comfortable situation. So we everyone is after knowledge. So the question is then, how do you acquire perfect knowledge? What is knowledge? How do you acquire perfect knowledge? And how it can be useful in your life? Okay, so let's start with what is knowledge. So there are three different terminologies. Information, which is in Sanskrit is called, or Hindi is called Suchna, and theoretical knowledge, Gyan, and practical knowledge, which is termed as Vigyan. So what is the difference? The difference is information is something that you receive an information, but you cannot act on it. You can't implement it. For example, if I say uh, it rained in my place, so it's an information. You just get the information and that's it. You don't do anything about it. Then the next category is theoretical knowledge, which is also termed as gyan. So theoretical knowledge means it is right now theoretical, but you can have a practical implementation. You can implement it if you want to. So that is Gyan. And then coming to Vigyan or practical knowledge, Vigyan is also translated as science in English. So practical knowledge is the knowledge, it's actually the practical implementation of the theoretical knowledge. And then what is perfect knowledge? How do you categorize perfect knowledge? So whatever knowledge we have gained, let's say as a student, as a science student, or in our school, whatever we have gained, we generally use them just for some purpose. For example, to make your livelihood, to earn your livelihoods, to work, to utilize that at your work. So that is not not a real practical implementation. Basically, something which you practically implement in your own life, which actually affects you personally. That is termed as perfect knowledge because that is the knowledge which will be useful, which will um, drive away ignorance from you. So, but but all the knowledge that we have acquired up till now throughout our life, either they fall under category of information or they fall under the category of theoretical knowledge. Somewhat there are practical knowledge, but they're not perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead. What is the process of acquiring knowledge? So there are four processes. Let's start with direct perception. Direct perception involves uh, perceiving the world, the reality, through your senses like nose, eyes, ears, skin, tongue, or through extended senses like it could be through some instruments like microscope, telescope, or computer, or things like these, or even your glasses that you wear. So, and the next process is logical inference. Um, it's basically deducing to an inference based on logic. So if you, for example, if you see smoke, then you infer that there has to be fire. So this comes under logical inference. Now, logical inference is also based on direct perception. First, you have to perceive that there is smoke, and then you logically infer that there should be fire, which is producing the smoke. And then the third process is historical reference. So historical reference means you do some archaeological survey or you study some historical records, and that's how you gain information or basically knowledge. So it could be like related to what is the origin of human being, with how the life came on earth, what is the process of creation of this universe, how the sun, stars, and the universes came into being, how life came into being, and to have some reference about what happened in the past. Like maybe you want to know about ice age, or you want to know about some animals got extinct, or you want to know about some dynasty which ruled on specific parts of earth. So all of these come under historical reference. Again, this also is heavily dependent on direct perception, because you have to perceive things before you conclude a historical knowledge. So all of these processes, direct perception, logical inference, and historical reference, they are relative in the sense that they give you only relative knowledge. They cannot give you absolute knowledge, because we are living in a relative world. And if we use anything from this world, which is going to give you relative information, relative knowledge. Also, these three processes are ascending knowledge, meaning you start from bottom and you go up. For example, I can give you an analogy. So, if you want to know about how a car works, so you try to start breaking down each and every nuts and bolts, and break down the car and understand how the engine works, how the wheel rotates, and everything. So, that's an ascending process of acquiring knowledge. Now, there can be another process which is a descending process, meaning you go to the manufacturer who has manufactured the car, and you understand from them. Maybe they have given you a manual, and then so if you have a Honda made car, you go to Honda and they'll give you a manual, and you understand how the Honda car works, or how the generic car works. So that is an descending process. So we'll cover the last one, the Shabda revealed sound, which is the only descending process, and we'll cover this in the end. Okay, so before we go into each of the processes in detail, just want to establish the fact that faith is an integral part of any process of acquiring knowledge, including all the three processes that we talked about: sense perception, logical inference, and historical reference. So, science has a strong, there is a strong element of faith involved in science as well. So, the fundamental assumptions of science, in science, there are three fundamental assumptions that we assume in order for us when we try to understand this universe, or when you try to understand life or ourselves. So, first assumption is all phenomena can be completely explained by natural laws expressed in language of mathematics. Then, second one is all physical laws apply everywhere and at all times. Third, fundamental natural laws are simple. So, these are the basic axioms or assumptions in science, and we tend to accept it as it is with blind faith. We never try to prove them, and it is also not possible to prove, because for example, if you take all physical laws apply everywhere and at all times, we cannot go and check this at each and every place. Have we tested have we tested any theory or um, any knowledge or any information that works on moon? Have you tested something under the ocean of under the surface of water under the ocean? And also, have we gone back in the past and tested whether this theory works? No, we can't do that. So, and then the other problem is we are actually trying to simplify everything, and we want to express everything in the language of mathematics. It's a simplification process. So the reason why scientists they feel compelled to adopt their strategy of simplification is that if the underlying reality of the universe can be described by simple quantitative laws, then they can understand the universe and possibly manipulate it. Even considering the limitation of human mind, we tend to assume that things are very simple. This is called a reductionistic method. But, however, if the universe were infinitely complex, then their reductionistic method is doomed to fail at the onset. So this is our basic assumption. We are assuming that the entire universe is very simple, is not complex, and can be explained in mathematical language. So there is a strong element of faith involved, even in science. And if we consider some of these phenomena like redshift. So what is redshift? Redshift is caused by a Doppler effect, which means whenever an object which is emitting some wave in terms of light or sound, if it is going away from you, then your spectrum or the wave shift towards the red side in the spectrum of light. And if the object is moving towards you, then it is observed that the light actually shift towards the blue side of the spectrum. So the scientists they observed that when the stars are moving, they could observe the Doppler effect or the red shift in the stars. So that's how they concluded that the stars are moving away from us and the universe is expanding. So some of these, another example is man landing on moon. Whether we know man has landed on moon, we can't say it for sure. Several years ago, there was news that man went on moon, and then NASA has also published some videos and pictures of man landing on moon. But there are a lot of questions. Um, there's a lot of questions raised, right? For example, they went on moon in 1950s or 60s, but then that was the first time, and after that, why are they not going again? Um, and then I've seen the videos and pictures of all these exploration when the scientists went on moon. Um, some of the facts were misrepresented, meaning if your spacecraft when it lands on any surface, it has to propel a lot of gas against the surface to beat the gravitational force, which means and they have shown that the surface of the moon is very soft and it has a lot of dust, and when they're walking it leaves deep impressions of their foot in the sand or in the dust of the surface of the moon. So if there is so much of dust and it is all loose dust, so when your spacecraft is landing, you will put so much of thrust downwards towards the moon gaseous thrust. So that should actually uh, blow off all the dust from the bottom of the spacecraft. So, but if you look at the picture of the spacecraft sitting on the surface of Moon, you see that there is a level ground just below the spacecraft. So we don't know why there was no crater created. So there are certain questions about that, and well, the question really is not whether man has landed on Moon or not, but the question is the point here is that we have a strong faith that whatever scientists they are telling us that is truth, and we take it for granted. Similarly, redshift by the observation of redshift, we conclude that universe is expanding, but we have not tried to find out maybe there is some other reason or some other cause of redshift. Doppler effect is not the only cause. We've not tried to find out. And we don't know because we are trying to deal with studying stars and suns and planets. We can't even understand what's happening in on Earth. Then what to speak of all these phenomena that are happening beyond, which are beyond our Earth. Similarly, relativity theory, Albert Einstein, evolution, theory of evolution, and the Big Bang theory. So the Big Bang theory is a single point of infinitesimal mass, temperature, and density. It existed and it came into existence out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it exploded. And that explosion is called Big Bang, and it is because of that explosion, all these different stars, planets, sun, moon, everything came into being. So that is the theory. We tend to believe all of these theories as it is without challenging or um, with strong faith. So all I'm trying to do here is trying to show that we have strong faith, and faith is a integral part of science or any other process of acquiring knowledge. Okay, so what are the fallacies of the relative strategies? So we talked about three relative strategies: direct perception, logical inference, and historical reference. The problem is uh, there are, we as a human being, as a mundane person, are we actually have four defects. Number one, we must commit mistakes. Everyone commits mistake, right? Number two, we must be illusioned. Everyone is illusioned. Then he must possess the tendency to cheat others. That's the problem. Everyone wants to cheat others. Then the fourth one is, and the most important is, all our senses are imperfect. So whatever we see, for example, we see sun is a small disk, but that is not true, right? Um, we don't even know this. We may have calculated the size of sun using a telescope and some other instruments, but these instruments are also an extended senses, and they are also subject to defects. So we can't acquire perfect knowledge with these defective senses and with these defects in mundane people. Also, these three processes of acquiring knowledge are limited to matter. You can't go beyond antimatter. What is antimatter? Something which is not a matter. For example, consciousness. How do you define consciousness? How do you define mind? Whether brain and mind are same? How do you define emotions? Love, anger, greed, pride. How do you define these? Can you define them in terms of matter? No, these are antimatter. What are we? People call we are. We people say we are spirit, soul. We are not this body. So what is soul? It is an antimatter. We can't understand antimatter with instruments or with senses or by any of the relative process of acquiring knowledge. because it is limited to the um, to certain level. It is limited to the material level. Then based on theory of it is based on theory of elimination, and it is based on faulty assumptions. So we already looked at the faulty assumptions. Now what is the theory of elimination? The way science works is you propose a theory and then you gather evidences to substantiate your theory. But you may also acquire some certain other evidences which are against your theory, and the scientists usually tend to discard them, and they tend to take the evidences that support their theory. So there was one fossil of a huge dinosaur which was kept in a museum in, I believe, in New York City. Um, and it was claimed that this entire fossil was excavated at a single place. But later on, it was studied and found out that some of the bone pieces or some of the pieces that was joined together was taken from some other exploration, some other site, or probably belonged to some other type of animal. So it was all brought together to prove their own theory. We're not saying that scientists are purposefully trying to mislead us, but we are human beings, and we human beings are subject to four defects. Senses are imperfect. We tend to cheat others. We are illusioned, and we make mistakes. Right? So at this point of time, then we want to ask whether we have any process that is perfect, that can give me perfect knowledge. Is there any process that can guarantee absolute correctness? So answer is yes. We have a descending process. I gave a brief glimpse of descending process with an analogy of trying to understand a car, right? So extending that, I just wanted you to understand that this descending process is called shabda or revealed sound. Shabda is a Sanskrit word and it means revealed sound, which means knowledge is acquired in a descending fashion from a perfect person, the absolute being who is simultaneously conscious of all points in space and time. So, extending the example where I said the manufacturer of the car can be the best person to give you knowledge about the car. Similarly, when we are born, we don't know who our mother and father are, right? So the ascending process is you go and do DNA analysis of all the people on this earth. That's not possible. And even if after you do DNA analysis, we don't know whether it will give you perfect results. You could have a DNA match to your closest relative, or something else may go wrong. First of all, it is not possible to test all the people in the whole earth. So the other process is that you understand from your mother about your father, who is your father, and similarly. So that is the descending process. Okay, to give you another example, in medical field we have allopathy, which is the modern medicine, medicinal knowledge, and then there is a age old proven process, or it's called Ayurveda. It is actually coming from Vedas, and it is perfect. You know, most of the diseases, chronic diseases, cannot be cured in allopathy. For example, you have cholesterol problem, or thyroid problem, or blood pressure problem, or sugar problem, diabetes problem. You have to take medicine throughout your life. You cannot uproot it from the root. You cannot get rid of the problem in allopathy. But in Ayurveda, you have certain certain lifestyle recommendations, certain medicines, or certain basic stuff which actually works at the root level, and it uproots or fixes your basic problem rather than focusing on symptoms. So that is perfect knowledge. Similarly, you have Vedic astrology for prediction, for predicting your future. It works perfect, provided you have good understanding of it and you have learned it from an authoritative source. That's very important. So that's why, therefore, in so Bhagavad Gita, which is uh, it is a literature which is coming down from God Himself, Krishna, and He defines the process of acquiring knowledge. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya upadakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. So this knowledge is when you receive it from Bhagavad Gita, it is a perfect knowledge. But there are some certain basic ingredients that are required to receive that perfect knowledge. First of all, it should be coming down from an authoritative source. So here, God or Krishna is the authoritative source, and He is giving us information about this world, about this universe, about this life. So that is an authoritative source. Then second criteria is it should be coming down in an unbroken chain. It's called a parampara system. Guru imparts this knowledge to his disciples, and then disciples further depart this knowledge to his disciples. So that way the knowledge is unbroken. And humility and submissive hearing and surrender, these are the characteristics, or these are the basic principles of, or requirements for receiving this knowledge. So in future sessions, we will take up some more elaborate um, analysis of some of these scientific phenomena, and then we'll understand in more detail what is the descending process, what is the Shabda process, and how it is perfect.